Hi, this is Dinosaur King, and this time, I'm going to be bringing forth something a bit special. I'm sure that most of you have seen the conclusion of Goji Center's Hybrid War, which occurred during Dinovember, where Gilgamesh and the Carnivores are both the winners of their tournament. And this could not be any more of a fitting time to release this video. However, as much of a surprising twist as that was, congratulations, by the way, for the creators of Gilgamesh and Carnivores if they're watching this video. This video is going to be mostly focusing on a little mini-series in which Creature Archives has made with their hybrid, Apollon, where after wiping out the Indominus 2.0 in their video, they went towards the mainland, which is where things went downhill from there for literally every living creature present within that area, including humans. Though it was by creating a counter-hybrid of their own in the form of Achilles, the Apollon invasion had ended as soon as the Achilles started to infiltrate their colonies. However, it was while recently watching these videos that one issue still stands. Even if the Apollon were eradicated, as the Achilles had also fallen not long afterwards, the damage towards the local ecosystems of South America were already done. Large megafaunal herbivores were wiped out by the ever-growing colonies, and yes, that would also include the invasive Colombian hippos, who had played a role in maintaining the local plant life. And without them, the plant life within the Amazon rainforest, as well as a few other locations within South America to name a few, would just become dense and overgrown. And it's this exact reason why I've decided to make a hybrid that not only solves that issue in terms of that very ecological gap left behind, but it would also help manage the raising issues of the overgrown flora, which winded up making rebuilding civilization rather difficult, along with increasing the risks of forest fires. Not only am I going to be creating this hybrid who's mostly going to be a herbivore, emphasis on mostly, but this will also be in the form of one group of animals that have been overlooked as not exactly in the form of a component necessarily, but as a base genome throughout the majority of the hybrid wars, which are Stegosaurids. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I find the lack of Stegosaurid hybrids disturbing. Seriously, there's like maybe 2 or 3 from what I've seen and heard about, but that's just it. Which leaves me to believe that they're pretty much overshadowed by more well-known herbivorous dinosaurs like ceratopsids, ankylosaurids, nodosaurids, sauropods, along with a whole selection of herbivorous mammals to name a few. And of course, I shall bring respect towards Stegosaurids by creating this hybrid for that second reason as well. If I had to pick between the Indominus 2.0 and Apollon as the worst form of a living extinction event, I'd say that Apollon would definitely be the worst out of the two. Not exactly because of any other reason, but the fact that their flight allows them to not become limited to an island. And also, they have been showcased being able to take down an Indominus 2.0 in swarms. It's mostly due to being able to shoot a harpoon out of their mouth, which is filled with poison, which will make short work of anything they come across. That, and also they're capable of spreading out in large ever-growing numbers in a similar fashion to fire ants. And trust me, these guys do not f*** around. In this scenario, the Apollon had broken out of containment after the downfall of the Indominus 2.0 and the eruption of Mount Sibos. Well, the Apollon invasion played out exactly as was shown in both Creature Archives videos, where they spread across South America, all the way up towards Mexico. And of course, when the Achilles had successfully managed to bring down the Apollons along with them. But of course, there is still one problem that was left behind. Due to wiping out the majority of the medium to large-sized fauna found within South America, along with a few in Mexico, this resulted into the overgrowth of the local plant life, as most of the animals that were wiped out by the Apollons themselves are herbivores, whose feeding habits are what kept environments, such as the Amazon rainforest, in check. This issue alone made rebuilding civilization nearly impossible, especially since this is a one-way ticket to having the world's largest forest fire. The creation of this hybrid starts with the very same geneticists who created the Trichopteryx and the Megalocaris, who offered this very proposal, especially once after a few rogue hybrids have been recently sighted. They agreed, as they had expected this proposal to restore the ecology of South America, without human intervention, of course, as our geneticists began to work on their latest project. Starting with the base, of course, is the namesake of the specific lineage of Ornithian dinosaurs, the Stegosaurus. Besides the sauropods that lived within the Morrison Formation during the late Jurassic period, the Stegosaurus was an absolute unit of a herbivore of its time for a few reasons. While it's notable for its dorsal plates, which gave the Stegosaurus its name meaning roofed lizard, it's also known for its most formidable weapon in the form of 4 long tail spikes at the end of its tail. These sharp spikes, often referred to as thagomizers, are about 3 feet or 1 meter in length, which, backed by the fact that it had a surprisingly flexible tail that gave it the swinging range of 180 degrees, and also the fact that it could swing with a speed of 90 miles per hour to 144 kilometers per hour. This would have allowed the full force of these tail spikes to hit up to 1,300 to 1,800 newtons of force per swing, which allows it to pierce through most of the toughest hides within the animal kingdom, and literally through solid bone, effectively making it into a living hole puncher, which would be a pretty bad time for any would-be predators that lived alongside Stegosaurus, such as Torvosaurus, perhaps Rexariosaurus, and the most infamous of them all, Allosaurus, which Stegosaurus definitely went toe-to-toe with. Most Allosaurus who attempted to take on a Stegosaurus weren't so lucky, including one who, try not to get this video demonetized here, took a thagomizer to its pelvic bone. And let's just say that Allosaurus ain't gonna be mating for life after that. And if that wasn't enough, the Stegosaurus also had a secret form of defense within the underside of its neck, in the form of a series of tiny pebble-shaped structures known as gular armor, in which, to put this into basic terms, it's basically a natural form of chainmail that would have protected its neck, which would certainly make biting into its neck rather awkward, with the 2 rows of dorsal plates being on the back of its neck on top of that, which probably resulted with most predators having to resort to going towards the sides of the animal, which are effectively within tail swinging range. Of course, there are 3 different subspecies of Stegosaurus specifically, though for me, it was between 2 of them. I went with Stegosaurus stenops over Stegosaurus ungulatus. While Stegosaurus ungulatus was the largest between the 2 subspecies, Stegosaurus stenops was a brilliant choice in terms of where I wanted to go with this hybrid. As amazing of an animal Stegosaurus was in life, it still wouldn't hurt to give it a few upgrades, to say the very least, especially when it comes to offense, defense, along with a few other aspects. Speaking of offense and defense, there is only one animal that could provide both protecting its flanks in both of these terms, and that would be the Stegosaurus' distant cousin, the Kentrosaurus. While smaller than Stegosaurus itself, it has a few more points in terms of defense in comparison, in the form of both the amount of tail spikes it has, along with 2 additional spikes on its shoulders. I will gladly be taking both of those aspects of the Kentrosaurus and applying it to this genome ASAP, especially considering that this would make the task of our hybrid protecting itself in terms of the sides of its body a bit easier, if in the event it comes across any potential threats or predators, to name a few. When it came to utilizing the Stegosaurus' base genome, there was one theory that's been going around where there have been a few instances where these things could stand onto their hind limbs, but only just for a brief moment. While the only explanation to that theory I could see is that this might be a way to allow them to feed from slightly taller cycads. But besides that, I might also include a few other creatures as a way to perhaps add or enhance that potential traits. The third species that's been selected for this genome is one that not many would think of as a part of that method. This would be the Ludamahadi. For those who don't know, Ludamahadi was by far one of the largest prosauropods during the early Jurassic period, where it once lived in what is now southern Africa, This dinosaur, along with others of that same group, were also another animal that's not really well represented within the hybrid wars. And it's a shame too, since prosauropods are the founding points of what would later lead to the sauropods during the Mesozoic era that we'd all come to know and love. While being one of the largest herbivores was a key factor to leading towards its later descendants, their long necks allowed it to reach taller foliage, along with its ability to stand onto its hind limbs. These two traits would definitely help our hybrid in terms of foliage feeding flexibility, to say the very least. In addition, I will also be applying their claws and powerful limbs in order to not only allow it to support switching into a bipedal stance, it would also give it the option to literally throw its clawed hands. And before you jokingly say in the comments, yes, it would just wind up becoming a bit like Godzilla in terms of its stance. You're not as clever as you think. Nice try, but I'm already 2 steps ahead. Anyways, while being able to feed on low browsing and taller foliage is required, it still has one limitation. Stegosaurs aren't exactly the kind of animals I'd call being migratory. However, there is one animal that could easily fix that issue, and there is only one solution for both endurance and size. This is where the 4th genome will come into play. The Edmontosaurus. While there are 2 subspecies of Edmontosaurus, I went with Edmontosaurus antennictens over Edmontosaurus regalis. For one, this hadrosaur does get slightly bigger than T-Rex. And of course, I'm going to be incorporating this size into my hybrid straight off the bat. It's also one of the most nomadic animals during the late Cretaceous period. And that is all thanks to special muscle attachments that connect between its tail and pelvic bone, along with specialized pads on their feet that cushion against high impacts while sprinting, which would make migrating for miles from one area to another easier said than done. However, as impressive as their pelvic bone is, which might have allowed them to stand and run on their hind limbs, they also have a stiff tail with additional neural spines that run down the sides of its tail. And of course, I am not willing to sacrifice my hybrid's flexible tail, especially considering the fact that the Thagomizer is one of the greatest weapons in its arsenal in terms of both offense and defense. A way to easily give it impeccable endurance and stamina, while also keeping the flexibility of its tail, is to give it a hybridized pelvic bone, which could in turn solve both problems of sacrificing both of these viable traits. And not to mention, it could also allow our hybrid to stay in a bipedal stance if it decides to start throwing its clawed hands around. I thought about using Iguanodon for that same reason, but Edmontosaurus was a better pick when size came into question. Speaking of which, while using a large sauropod like Diplodocus was suggested, it would just wind up becoming a problem since the trees within rainforests are closely packed next to each other. Let me explain. It would make maneuvering around the rainforest rather difficult due to the additional size if it were to be given to this hybrid. However, with the size of Edmontosaurus on the other hand, it would just wind up becoming ideal for maneuvering through the rainforest, especially one that had become dense and overgrown due to the absence of large megafaunal herbivores within the area to maintain it. Anyways, it would be foolish not to add a bit more defense in terms of its neck, tail, sides, and around the back of its body. This is why I went with Scelidosaurus. While Nodosaurs and Ankylosaurs have impressive bony osteoderms, it would just wind up weighing my hybrid down if it were to be added to it, thus making the chances of optional bipedal combat no longer exactly being possible, while also limiting our hybrid's mobility at the same time. However, the osteoderms found on Scelidosaurus are relatively lighter in comparison, while also providing protection for the animal itself. Of course, I will be genetically selecting these osteoderms to start forming on the sides of the neck, body, and back of our hybrid, which, along with its already impressive dorsal plates, should provide a bit of protection for the back and the sides of our hybrid. And with some of that armoring on the sides of its neck, yeah, it would definitely make biting into its neck more awkward than it already was before. And now, for the 6th part of this genome, the cave bear. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Why would you throw a bear into its genome? And to that, I will gladly answer that very question. While at first glance, it seems to share some similarities to most bears who tend to be omnivorous. Interestingly though, the cave bear was primarily a herbivore. I am tipping my hat to Prehistoric Kingdom for that interesting fact, by the way. And like most bears, it had powerful limbs, its back legs that allowed it to support a bipedal stance, while its forelimbs allowed it to deliver powerful blows which are capable of breaking bone. Of course, this aspect would be included into our hybrid, while also slightly increasing our hybrid's movement speed in addition. Of course, I will also be including the bear's most useful aspects, its sense of smell, which should aid our hybrid with catching the scent of plants, along with its own kind, as well as a few potential threats before they come across each other face to face. While the spikes and additional osteoderms are already an impressive set of defense, given the size of our hybrid, it would be a mistake not to enhance this same aspect for their skin. For that exact reason, I have selected the Javan Rhino as our 7th species. While this is a critically endangered species, thanks humans, this animal does have a very thick hide that is comprised of dense and cross-linked collagen fibers, which is about 2 to 5 centimeters thick. While this hide certainly provides protection against thorns, bites, and taking blows from other rhinos and predators alike, its skin, however, isn't exactly sunburn-proof unless it rolls around in the mud. However, I'm only including the thickness and density of the Javan Rhino's hide, while keeping the already present scales from its base genome, rather than just straight up putting rhino skin onto it. This enhanced thickness towards its skin would wind up giving it a bit of an armored plating-like appearance. And of course, to add something a bit extra, I am also giving our hybrid its singular horn, in which our hybrid could use as a third weapon within its arsenal if any potential threat decides to go towards the front. For our 8th species, there is a solution to at least 3 aspects that are lacking within our Stegosaurid hybrid, and thankfully, there is only one animal that is suitable for covering these exact gaps. That would be the wild boar.
That's a bit sussy!
I know, the same animal Vincent used as practice while he was in the aviary on that island near Scotland. But hear me out. It's well known that boars have one of the most impressive immune systems within the animal kingdom. Well, that is going to be a very useful trait that I'll be adding to my hybrid due to the countless diseases that it may come across within the southern parts of the New World. It's also one of the few highly intelligent animals that we know of, and when compared to domestic pigs, their brains are comparatively larger, and have around 1.77 billion neurons in comparison. While it might not be on par with elephants or primates, it should give our Stegosaurid hybrid a boost in terms of its IQ department, at least for when it comes to memorizing locations, people, and even events, as well as forming complex social structures as well. Another known fact that boars are highly aggressive, which also comes along with the fact that boars have a form of pain tolerance. If these traits were to be applied to our hybrid, it would wind up becoming its greatest defense yet, especially once potential predators start entering the scene. Speaking of defenses, there is one thing that could aid in that department as well, and there is no better pick than the alligator snapping turtle. The alligator snapping turtle was one of the few species of turtles to have an impressive bite force. Like, I'm talking a good ol' 1,000 pounds per square inch, which is more than enough to allow these guys to allegedly bite your finger off. Now, considering that Stegosaurus has about 900 pounds per square inch in terms of raw bite force, if this is applied to our hybrid, that might wind up becoming a bite force of 1,900 pounds per square inch, which is very similar to that of hippos, which would not only make it yet another way to defend itself, but it would also make it easier to feed on tougher plants, including tree bark. Of course, since the Amazon rainforest has large, vast waterways, it would be foolish not to include their toe webbing, along with their lung capacity, which would allow them to hold their breath up to 40 to 50 minutes at best. While our hybrid might not be spending most of its time underwater, it will definitely aid in crossing vast rivers and lakes alike. Of course, these guys are omnivorous in nature, it wouldn't surprise me if this thing started going for fish every now and then. You might be thinking, hold on, you said this was going to be a herbivore, and yes, it's going to mostly be herbivorous. However, let me shed some light on the subject for a moment. In nature, there are moments where herbivores often supplement their nutritional needs through feeding on meat or carrion. This rare moment is seen in deer where they eat smaller birds. Horses would do the same thing, giraffes would chew on bones, and even within the paleontological side of things, there have been fossilized evidence that hadrosaurs have eaten a few crabs before. They do this for two things: calcium, which is one of the many minerals required for bone development, as well as forming eggs, and protein, which is for muscle development. So while this hybrid would mostly be herbivorous, it's not going to turn down any kind of opportunity if it means acquiring these exact vitamins in the event that plants start becoming scarce. Speaking of bones, while a horn is a good weapon, it would be foolish not to add reinforcement towards both the head and the hooked beak of our hybrid. And of course, this shall be established by the last and final creature selected for this genome, the pileated woodpecker. This bird earned that title due to holding a little trick within its beak, in the form of an outer layer of keratin that is both highly resistant to blunt force, and it's also abrasion resilient, as well as being reinforced with a spongy core within their beaks that would allow them to absorb the incoming shock of their blows. And in order to put holes into the side of trees, just to acquire insects, it will need strong neck muscles, along with a phenomenal shock absorbent system that can only be found in the vertebrae within that very same neck, both in which the pileated woodpecker is already equipped with. These traits, if applied to the genome of our hybrid, should allow it to effectively reinforce the hooked beak, as well as its neck to effectively deliver powerful swings when it comes to jabbing its horn into potential threats, while in addition also providing some protection towards its head further. With all of the species that are carefully selected, it was time to sequence the genome of this hybrid. Introducing the Rexariosaurus, its name meaning brawler lizard, which is self-explanatory. This hybrid, along with others of its kind, shall serve as the warden of the southern parts of the New World. Of course, in addition to its creation, the geneticists had made not one, but two different subspecies of this hybrid. Oh, what, you thought it was going to be just one hybrid species? No. There's going to be two subspecies of Rexariosaurus, one being Rexariosaurus amazonis, and the second being Rexariosaurus sonoris, both species reaching lengths of 43 feet, or 13 meters long, with a height of 13 feet or 4 meters tall, while also being about 15 feet or 4.5 meters tall while in a bipedal stance, and weighing about a good ol' 2,600 kilograms, or 2,866 tons. These hybrids are raised within a hidden facility where they would grow up within two separate biodomes, before being sent out to their expected locations. Upon hatching from the two separate batches of 8 synthetic eggs, they were no larger than a common house cat. While they're small, their bites are still something that shouldn't be taken lightly. However, they are curious about their surroundings. The Amazonas hatchlings were exploring the rainforest biodome as they started feeding on and also investigating every rock and plant they come across, while the Sonoris hatchlings were living off some of the tough shrubs and cactus they encountered. Feeding sessions were self-explanatory as many staff members sent in crates filled with the plants of each of the two subspecies environments. A few tests had been performed as both Rexariosaurus subspecies were challenged by the elements of each given environment they'll establish. And no matter the condition, both managed to survive with little to no issues. As soon as they reach adolescence, the geneticists had found the two males that hatched along with 4 other females. As seen here, one of the males was standing in front of what could be seen as a female, while the other male backed down before the fight could even begin. That young male would one day come back stronger. The geneticist had named this male Atlas, who would one day lead a whole herd of his own species, along with a few others, across the rainforests of South America. As soon as their horns, plates, and spikes began to become pronounced, along with their maturing colors, is the second they really started becoming territorial. While females would only attack if threatened or provoked, the males would be the first to protect their herd, even from rivaling males who would seek to take their place. It was while seeing their mature colors and patterns setting in, the difference between male and female became apparent. For the Amazonas species, the dorsal plates of males tend to give off an orange coloring near the tips of their plates, while females don't exactly display these orange colors. For the Sonoran species, it's a bit different. While both males and females have a magenta hue where their stripes start running down the sides of their bodies, males have a similar color tipped on their dorsal plates, while the females don't have such coloring on their dorsal plates. It became clear that the plates had three purposes in one that were once theorized within the fossil record. They use these plates to attract potential mates, as well as intimidating threats and rivals alike by rattling them while readying their tails, or when they're standing onto their hind legs while baring their clawed forelimbs. And of course, to regulate their body temperature, something in which proved to be beneficial for the Sonoran species considering that they live in the desert, while also being a bit subtle for the Amazonas species, but still just as beneficial once they step into the plains further down south of their soon-to-be new home. And before they get any larger, they were sent into metal crates where both subspecies were dropped off into their scheduled locations. The Sonoran being sent into the deserts of Mexico, while the Amazonas were sent into the Amazon rainforest where they began to establish themselves within each of their respectful environments. While at least a few more groups of Rexariosaurs were being made back in the hidden facility, the current two groups have reached maturity as the dense overgrowth had become monitored and maintained by the large herbivores. The Sonoran species tend to travel across the desert in search of food, and of course water every now and then. Such places became their nesting spots where their offspring are watched and cared for by the rest of the herd, until eventually moving on once they start reaching maturity. This herd was led by a male named El Gigante, who is as tough as he is protective over his herd, while the Amazonas species thrived off the plentiful yet various plant life within the rainforests of South America, often traveling from one part to another, which, thanks to the traits provided by some of the other species within their genome, like the webbed feet, as well as the lung capacity of the alligator snapping turtle, which helped them cross vast riverways and lakes. Of course, like their desert subspecies, the Amazonas species often nest where there's water and plenty of plants to feed on. However, this herd was led by another male, who was challenged by Atlas. But this time, he came prepared for a fight. He was willing to take back his herd from the rival male. It was while observing through the drone cams hovering over the Amazon rainforest is when the researchers discovered that the male Rexariosaurs don't actually fight each other using their horns, nor their thagomizers. Instead, they use their powerful forelimbs to wrestle with each other while being in a bipedal stance. The objective of this was simple. Whoever was still standing gets the right to lead their herd, while the other who gets shoved back or is knocked over has to leave the herd on their own. As the two large dinosaurs clashed, they shoved each other as fiercely as they could with all of their strength. At first, it seemed like the rival male had the upper hand, until eventually Atlas managed to knock the rival male onto his side. He snorted at the rival male as the rival male slowly got back up before slowly leaving in defeat. Atlas had won against his rival, and now it was time to reunite with his herd. As the balance between the wilds of South America and the deserts of Mexico were beginning to become restored, there were still a few ecological gaps left behind by the Apollon invasion, along with plenty more left within South America. It didn't take long until some of the other companies offered to assist in the restoration project within South America, perhaps with a few species of their own. Our geneticists agreed, as even a few volunteers are welcome. Even if they're another genetics company, every bit does help, especially since they know well that this project could restore what had become lost during the Apollon invasion. Though, of course, when it came to rogue hybrids, a few had started making their way down south. For some even bear the resemblance, as well as a few similarities, as the old enemies their base genome ancestors had faced 145 million years before. Wow, that was something. Anyways, I hope you all like Atlas, along with the subspecies cousin, El Gigante. While I was working on this hybrid, I decided to make this not only as a way to raise Stegosaur awareness to the hybrid wars, but also as a way to do something a bit different this time around, where this would be a hybrid that would fix the damages caused by another disaster, at least on the ecological side of things anyway. And of course, the aftermath of Creature Archive's Apollon invasion was the perfect scenario for that. Feel free to let me know which Rexariosaurus subspecies is your favorite in the comments down below. Speaking of which, shoutouts to Creature Archives, who was the creator of Apollon, and of course, Achilles. Also feel free to check them out if you haven't already. I'd also like to say, with the conclusion of Goji Center's Hybrid War, and of course this video being made during Dinovember, there couldn't have been a better time to introduce this hybrid to all of you. Though, I do have a few other things I have to do, so part 2 doesn't exactly have a release date. Just think of this as a Minecraft mod, where not even the mod devs themselves know when a update for said mod is going to be released. But of course, until then, I'll see you all around. Bye-bye!